was the last one? I want to get this long.
Hey, everyone. I like to quote Mike Mueller, and he produced a book called Motor City Muscle. In the past, purpose-built performers were known as supercars, an apt, certainly simple description for machines that, though they weren't quite faster than a speeding bullet, were still capable of making your heart leap into your throat in a single bound. Today we call them muscle cars, a moniker that was being used occasionally in the 70s, but didn't really come into vogue until after these strong running vehicles retired from the scene and began gaining collector value. Like the dinosaurs before them, muscle cars came into this world, briefly made a lot of noise, fell victim to a changing environment, then ended up in the museums. Unlike those bleached stacks of bones, however, the American muscle car has managed to rise from the dead to once again roam the streets of this continent looking for prey. Today I would like to compare and contrast the key components of the classic and modern muscle car. So, I've always been fascinated into cars, but I don't own one myself. I watched a lot of movies like Drive, Need for Speed. Those kind of movies kind of influenced me to get into this subject. I mean, those are not credible, but have influenced my attention for this subject. So I'm sure everyone's driven in a car, or has driven in a car, but I don't think anyone's here driven in a high-octane, blood-pumping, just a badass vehicle machine of a car, like a muscle car. And who doesn't want to be seen in a hot rod? So to further explain what I mean by key components are the features, dynamics, and historical aspects of modern and classical muscle cars. Some of the examples of cars that we will be looking at are the Mustangs, the more common ones, the Camaro, and the Challenger. Why I picked these three cars is because, well, they're out there right now as modern cars, muscle cars, and we can look at them from the predecessors and they're easy to compare and contrast. So, one of the most distinctive aspects of the muscle car was their audience, how it pulled them in during the 60s, 70s, and to current day. It was because the baby boomers, modern muscle cars live now and live then. It was a symbol of youth, it was a symbol of freedom and individualism. And it's still are today. But in contrast, pricing has changed tremendously. As we look here, we're comparing the Camaro 2011 and the 1969 SS396, and we can see here that a base price for 2011 for this particular model right here would be $3,091 in that day, but would be a value of today's currency of $18,400. The 2011 model, which is right here, is a value of $31,000. And we can see that's a huge, tremendous gap in pricing compared to what it was back then, 18. Well, many of us would like to own that much right there, $3,000. Who wouldn't want to own a muscle car that cost $3,000 back then, or even today? But maybe there's a reason why these cars cost so much today compared to then. So let's check under the hood. But the commonality of the muscle cars today varies from the engine itself. Every car from the Challenger, the Mopars of back of the day, the Mustangs, the Camaros, the GTOs, they all had a fuel injection. I'm sorry, not a fuel injection. They had an engine, a V8 engine, which operated the power of the car. But there were two defining engines that operated from the modern and the classical era. The classical era obtained a carburetor, which was different from the fuel injection in a tremendous way. As we see here, this is an example of the different engines. This is a current day, and this is a classic. This is a carburetor engine right here, and this is a fuel injection. So what are the differences? The differences between fuel injection and the carburetor is that fuel injection equally distributes fuel towards the engine, and thus making it easier to start up the car, smooth function and ride, increase in fuel economy, but it does lack power when it comes to performance. And it also costs more to insure and to have run. But in comparison to the carburetor, it does have more power and precision, but lacks everything that a fuel injection has in a car, which is what I've previously described to you earlier. Just for a current example, a Mustang GT 2014 runs on 0 to 60 miles per hour at 4.7 seconds, compared to a 1969 Mustang Mach 1 runs 5.4 per second, or in a second. Now that may not seem like a lot because it's like a second and more, but if you know cars, that's a pretty big gap. So in favor of obtaining these hot ride looking cars, I want to turn my point to the styling and features and what kind of things they have that are different in comparison. Modern cars are an excellent reboot of the retro look. As we see here, we have an example of the 1970 Challenger and the 2011 Challenger RT. So what are some differences? Not much. I mean, both are in like rectangular, both are aggressive looking. You know, they have this like beefed up attitude about them, and to be honest, they just the inventors of the modern one were just spot on into how this compares in looking. But there is a contrast into the interior of the car itself. We see here, this is a classical, the 1970. We see the wooden dashboard and the rigged seats, and they're leather too. This is actually an updated version of it. But it looks nice, it's classical, but if we see here, we have the highlights and the lights of the car where they show the revving and the gas mileage. We have more steel, we also have the rubber protecting the steering wheel compared to this. I mean, if you're gonna get a car crash, I mean, that would hurt so much compared to this. Navigation, air conditioning, things that basically this car doesn't have. But in talking about back then, all they cared about was how fast the car really went. So it wasn't about, oh, I got this and that, so and so, as we are all brats today, wanting the luxury of what this has. In conclusion, looking back, today I've talked about the historical influences, the pricing differences, what lies underneath the hood of the car, and how it works, and the styling features and the differentiations of generations. In truth, there's no real winner in which car is better or which generation is better. It's all up to you whether you want to, just don't really care about the luxury of today's modern cars, or that you just are that kind of guy who's into the technical aspect. But soon that will all change, and I hope that I can own one of these bad boys someday myself. This is a Bass Equus, and it will be coming out later on this year, and at a price of $270,000. Thank you very much.
All right, so George, what'd you think?
Okay, well, for his thesis, I got he was going to compare and contrast the components of muscle cars to some of their modern day predecessors. Yeah. I liked a lot of the compare and contrast. I liked how when he related them to dinosaurs. I thought that was really funny. I thought it really connected. I like that he covered all the different aspects of the cars, like the interior, the engine, the whole look. I thought that, and showed pictures of it. That was good. And I like that they were all like essentially the same car, but from a different year. So it was. I think it helped the connection a little bit better to see them like side by side. I did think that his transitions could have gone a little bit more smooth, more stating like this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing, and then I think he could have used a little bit more citation. Sometimes it seems like it was a little bit opinionated, like it was kind of just his opinion, like this one's cooler than this one. As far as the visual aids, I really like the picture with the two engines. I thought that was really easy to compare them. Like you could really see the difference between the two, and you like explain the differences in the motors and stuff like that. I didn't really like the first visual aid. I felt like it was. I liked the picture. Like it was good because you could see the two cars. But the information, I feel like he could have just said it instead of putting it on the screen. But overall, I really liked. I think he did a good job in comparing and contrasting the muscle cars, and the pictures really did help in seeing how they were in the past and how they evolved and where they're going in the future.
Okay. I'll echo a lot of the things that you said. I like the quote that you used to get our attention. I thought that you had a very clear statement of your goal. I like the dinosaur metaphor also. I think there's a lot of language in the speech that's interesting and has been put together in a way to kind of pull us in. I do think that sometimes gets lost because of your delivery, and that's one of the things that we're going to have to work on next time, because you come up with those interesting ideas and ways of expressing things, and then sometimes you just toss them off as you're speaking as if it's not something that deserves our attention, that it's just something that's casual in the background. And I think you need to draw a little bit more attention to it with some personality or with some emphasis. And when you are speaking less and less with the cards, less and less with the visual materials in the background, that'll force you, I think, to focus a little bit more on the vocal part of the delivery. So I thought the setup was all very solid. There's a very good preview at the beginning as well. I have to agree. I do think there needs to be some more source citation in the presentation. I know you got a lot of the information someplace, but I didn't really hear it being cited. I didn't have a problem. I understand what he's talking about on that first visual with the information about the cost. I think that probably could have been presented. It's almost a table chart the way it is, but it looks like it's just been kind of superimposed with some numbers on the background of the picture. And I think if it was a little bit more distinct and I don't know that it needs to be separate, but maybe down at the bottom or side to side, that would make the comparison a little bit easier and it would fit together. That's a minor quibble. Just something to, if you had unlimited time and unlimited skill when it came to putting all these things together, that would be something that you could work on there. I thought there were some nice explanations in the speech. You missed some opportunities to create a little bit more interest. There's plenty of stuff about the history of these vehicles that might make an intriguing human interest kind of story. Let's face it, you mentioned some of the movies at the beginning or the games that you played that involve driving those kinds of cars. Well, there's a long history of those sorts of things. When you put that Challenger up there, I immediately thought of Kowalski cruising across the desert in Vanishing Point in that 1971 Challenger, that sort of thing. Or you know, you've got the Charger that you're also talking about, the Camaros, you know, that kind of thing. There's just a lot of historical references, and you could probably pluck those in and tell a little story as you went along. On the other hand, it is a little overtime, so it's 9 minutes and 20 seconds, so you do have to cut some stuff out. I agree with George. I like the comparison with the engine shots. I thought that illustrated at least a concept of what you're talking about. This would be a place, I think, for instance, where maybe the table chart ought to be inserted, where we could see, okay, you've got the speed difference that you're talking about at one point. The power difference seems to be another issue. That might have been something that would have been easy to visualize there, just to superimpose some numbers there. I guess maybe it's one of those generational things when you talk about people that were driving or riding in those cars. You show the fuel injectors. I remember the first time I got a car with a fuel injector, I said, "Where's the butterfly flap? So when I stick my pencil in to get the car to start properly, it'll work." And it was like. And nowadays, people have no idea what you're talking about, because if they have never dealt with a carburetor that had that kind of problem. Why are you sticking a pencil in your car to get it to start? Well, you got to hold the butterfly flap open to get, so the air mix is not. They don't know what you're talking about, Today it's all technology, that sort of thing. The main negative thing that I have about the presentation is your delivery. And you're going to see it when you watch your speech. You start pacing after you get through the introduction. I thought you were pretty good in the introduction, but once you get out of the introduction, you start pacing around while you're speaking. And at the end of the speech, you actually give your exit line to the whiteboard. I mean, you are basically talking to the other side of the room here, and we're getting the back of your head when you're done. That's not the way it ought to be finishing up. Okay, thank you.